Hi guys, hope you're doing well. We're going to continue our study through the book of Acts. I hope this is a blessing to you. If it is, please like, subscribe, share it with other people, and we'll go ahead and jump right into this one. We're in chapter 23, and let's go ahead and see what God's Word has for us today. It says, Paul, looking intently at the council, well, number one, I guess, laid the groundwork, I guess. He was basically arrested as he was as he had gone into the temple and so forth, and now he's being brought before the council in Jerusalem. So, and he's going to give a defense there. So that's the backdrop, as it were, for what's going on. So Paul, looking intently at the council, said, "Brethren, I have lived my life with a perfect good conscience before God up to this day." The high priest Ananias commanded those beside him to strike him on the mouth. Then Paul said to him, "God is going to strike you, you whitewashed wall. Do you sit to try me according to the law, and in violation of the law order me to be struck?" Interesting, isn't it, that sometimes people in these it's hard to perceive that a person in a religious situation would be so aggressive to have someone struck or punched in the mouth or slapped in the mouth or whatever, and it shows you what happens when what religion can do. It can blind people where they become callous because they're going through their religious ceremonies, and they forget the humanity and the justice. And that's what Jesus condemned the Pharisees and the Sadducees and the scribes for, the religious order of Jerusalem, because they had had gone through the sacrifices, and it becomes such a ritualized form of in their life. That's what God had become to them, that they had forgot mercy and justice. And this is the things that God wanted, not just ceremonialism and ritualism. And you see that in most religions, and that's why people sometimes, these religious organizations that they belong to, do the things they do, yet they claim to love God, and that's be very hostile, violent, and other things. Even go so far as killing people in the name of their God. You see people who try to commit all kinds of atrocities, stabbing people, hurting people, striking people. I mean, all in the name of their God. And it's like, they don't seem to sense the fact that what they're doing is evil, And it's always strange to me how people can be so blinded that, you would hurt what God has created in another human being and yet call yourself a servant of God. It's always very strange how people can be like that, so deluded. And you have to be deluded in a religion to be able to do something like that. Anyway, he goes on and says, but the bystanders said, "Do you revile the God's high priest?" And Paul said, I was not aware, brethren, that he was the high priest. For it is written, you shall not speak evil of your ruler of your people. And some people look at that, oh, how did he not know? Well, you got to remember, Paul had been away from Jerusalem for many, many years when he came in. It's not like he's probably going to sit there and go, who's the high priest? And let me go meet him. And there was photographs and stuff for him to see. If he hadn't met this person, it wasn't like you had the internet. Or something like that, or even photography. He's not going to be able to see this person. So he probably wasn't aware of who the high priest was. And he says, but perceiving that one group were Sadducees and the other were Pharisees, Paul began crying out to the council, "Brethren, I am a Pharisee, a son of Pharisees. I am on trial for the hope of resurrection of the dead." As he said this, there occurred a dissension between the Pharisees and Sadducees, and the assembly was divided. For the Sadducees say that there is no resurrection, nor an angel, nor a spirit, but the Pharisees acknowledge them all. And there occurred a great uproar, and some of the scribes of the Pharisaic order or party stood up and began to argue heatedly, saying, "We find nothing wrong with this man. Suppose a spirit or an angel had spoken to him." And as a great dissension was developing, the commander was afraid Paul would be torn to pieces by them and ordered the troops to go down and take him away from them by force and bring him into the barracks. Again, you see this going down, and then you see the fortress bringing back into the barracks and so forth. It tells me that the temple, to me, that's one issue there that you can see. The temple and Mount Antonio and Fort Antonio was right next to each other, and they could literally look down and see what was going on in the temple. That to me tells me that there's a lot of credence to the fact of the ideal that on the Temple Mount itself was both to one side Fort Antonio, and the other portion of it at a lower elevation was the temple. according to the text. So I think that gives a lot of testimony, a lot of proof to that fact. And yeah, and I can't remember the guy's name, but he's a Jewish architect there, and he kind of formulated where he thought that the temple was. And it's interesting that he kind of came to the same conclusion, that the temple had to be at a lower elevation down on a bedrock, and that the Fort Antonio was actually higher, elevated up next to it, where kind of like where you see the Dome of the Rock at. That would be Fort Antonio, and where you see the Wailing Wall directly straight ahead would be where the temple was at on the bedrock. And then you could see where, if there's a staircase, you could easily see what was going on there, and they could walk down into it and put down any disturbances that were occurring, because often those disturbances, as we can see, were associated with the ruling class, and it was religious in nature. Obviously, with the nation of Israel, it was all encompassed within the power structure, as it was really of the priesthood and so forth, in the temple worship. So it made sense for the Romans to want to be as close to that as possible to, control any kind of dissension that could have occurred, and riots or anything else. Anyway, goes on and says, I just found that very interesting, how it kind of seems to suggest that the temple was right there, where it's situated at. He goes on and says, what does he say here? It says, but on the night immediately following, the Lord stood at his side and said, take courage, for as you have solemnly witnessed to my cause in Jerusalem, so you must witness at Rome also. Again, reiterating what Christ had already told him was going to happen, but the fact that God is there with him, Christ in himself is there beside him. I mean, you talk about no fear. you got to be completely, greatly strengthened in spirit and in strength, knowing that the Lord appears to it and is with you and says, "Hey, don't worry about it. Everything's going to be all right. You're going to go before Rome and give witness of me as well." And sometimes we need to understand that the Lord is with us, and when we go through troubles and trials, and as people confront us and on our faith, be it at any situation, especially what's going on in this world, in the darkness of it. And I'm going to basically do a video on that very thing, what's happening in the world and so forth. But because I think enormously we're moving into always in prophetic times, as it were, but what we see going on is very prophetic. So anyway, I look forward to a prophetic prophecy update on that. But what I would say is that, we don't, sometimes we're fearful. We think, oh my goodness, I'm going through such this and that, and this could happen, and this could happen, and this scenario could happen, and your mind goes through all these scenarios. But learning to let those possibilities or may happen type of events, let that go, and learn to trust and walk in the power of the Lord, that He's going to be with you, He's going to walk you through this, His Spirit's with you, and that He's going to put the right words in your mouth, He's going to put you in the right situation to accomplish His will. Doesn't mean that you're not going to suffer. Doesn't mean that you might not even be killed. But it means that you're walking in God's will, and you're being a living testimony to those who are going to perish because they've rejected the truth. But they don't die because they haven't heard the truth. They perish because they've heard it and rejected it. And the truth obviously is being Christ Himself. But it's just, for us, it's a good thing for us to remember that God is with us. And that just like He was here with Paul, He's here with us. And we need to be faithful in what we say and do as well, and just be honest to the truth of Christ and the message of it. Don't worry about all the other stuff. And sometimes it's hard to do that, maybe when you're on the spot, and you're under the light and under the gun. But it's one in which you should always be willing to go, yeah, it is true that Christ is going to be, here. So He's going to be with you during that time. So anyway, we'll continue on. It says, when it was day, and the Jews formed a conspiracy and bound themselves under an oath, saying that they would neither eat nor drink until they had killed Paul. There were more than 40 who formed the plot. And they came to the chief of priests and elders and said, "We have bound ourselves under a solemn oath to taste nothing until we have killed Paul." Well, I guess those guys probably didn't make it then, because they didn't kill Paul, obviously. So if they held true to their thing, they starved to death. Be careful of your oaths, right? That's what the Bible tells us as Scriptures. Christians, don't make oaths. Just let your word yes be yes, no be no, and don't make oaths, because you put yourself in a very bad situation. It says, now therefore, you and the council notify the commander to bring him down to you, as though you were going to determine his case by a more thorough investigation. And we, for our part, are ready to slay him before he comes near the place. So obviously they knew if they attacked Roman soldiers, their life would be forfeit. They're going to die. So they're prepared for martyrdom here. They're prepared to die for this. They're committed to that. They're going to kill Paul and try to run off and hide. But Rome doesn't forget, and they got a very long memory. They're going to come after you. And I'm sure they realize that the chance that they'll survive in that is going to be probably very slim, especially once their identity's revealed, It says, but the son of Paul's sister, or his nephew, heard of their ambush, and he came and entered the barracks and told Paul. So it does tell you a little bit about Paul. Paul had a sister who had children, so that's interesting. Paul called one of the centurions and told him, lead this young man to your commander, for he has something to report to him. So he took him and led him to the commander and said, Paul the prisoner called me to him and asked me to lead this young man to you, since he has something to tell you. The commander took him by the hand and stepped aside, began to inquire of him privately, what is it that you have to report to me? And he said, the Jews have agreed to ask you to bring Paul down tomorrow to the council, as though they were going to inquire something more thoroughly about him. So do not listen to them, for more than 40 of them are lying in wait for him, and bound themselves together under an oath not to eat or drink until they slay him. And now they are already waiting for the promise for you. So the commander let the young man go, instructing him, tell no one what you have notified me of these things. Interesting enough, it's like this commander's probably sitting there going, we're gonna take our own action, and obviously we're gonna see what he does here. But God has a way of working things out, and he did here in this case for Paul. Just as he promised, hey, you don't worry about what's going on here. You're going to be going on to Rome, and exactly as we see ultimately we'll see things played out. God was in control, and he used this young man to warn the centurion, and then ultimately the centurion moves Paul to safety. Again, God's in total control, and then we can learn from that, learn to trust him for our well-being in this life or in the life to come. And he called to him two of his centurions and said, get 200 soldiers ready in a third hour in the night, and proceed to Caesarea with 70 horses and 200 spearmen. So he's sending quite a few people. You're talking about a lot of people here. 470 people, to take this one prisoner. And so some people tried to sit there and say Fort Antonia was just this little small contingent of people. Well, it had to be quite a bit. You got 470 soldiers just taking one prisoner. He's not going to do that and leave himself in a bad situation. So I think Fort Antonia was quite big, quite large, and there was a lot of people there, a lot of soldiers. So this is they were also to provide mounts to put Paul on and bring him safely to Felix the governor. And he wrote a letter having this form: Claudius Lysias, to the most excellent governor Felix, greetings. When this man was arrested by the Jews and was about to be slain by them, I came up to them and with troops and have rescued him, having learned that he was a Roman, and wanting to ascertain the charge for which they were accusing him, I brought him down to their council. Interesting, he kind of said, I rescued because he was a Roman, but the reality was he rescued, he came down to rescue to see what was going on, so a riot didn't break out and he had to answer for that. And then he found out he was a Roman after the fact, but he wanted to lift himself up, in essence, and saying, hey, I come to rescue a Roman, and give himself a pat on the back or a feather in his cap or something, in essence, altering the truth of it. But whatever, interesting how people in their minds work, right? And I found him to be accused over questions about their law, but under no accusation deserving death or imprisonment. When I was informed that there was there would be a plot against the man, I sent him to you at once, also instructing his accusers to bring charges against him before you. It says, so the soldiers, in accordance with their orders, took Paul and brought him by night to Antipatris, but the next day, leaving the horsemen to go on with him. They returned to him by the barracks. Then they had come to Caesarea and delivered the letter to the governor, and they presented Paul to him. When he had read it, he asked from what province he was, and when he learned that he was from Cilicia, he said, I will give you a hearing after your accusers arrive, also giving orders for him to be kept in Herod's praetorium. All right, so Paul is on his way to Rome. He doesn't know it yet. I mean, he has an idea because obviously Christ told him that he's going to give testimony in Rome. But Paul is on his way to Rome. He's arrested. He's ultimately held in confinement for a long time. But at some point in time, he appeals to the emperor himself, and ultimately he's sent to the emperor. And we're going to see that coming up in the next few chapters where this takes place. Paul gives his defense before King Agrippa, and then ultimately he eventually winds up making an appeal to Caesar, to the emperor. And when he does, he's sent to there as a prisoner. And we know that ultimately he ends up in Rome. He lives there for a few years, 2 to 3 years or whatever, under a house guard, where he writes a lot and he instructs a lot to Christians. He becomes this really defining person in the church. And that's what makes the Apostle Paul so important in so many ways. And it was during this time he wrote so many letters, and some of these obviously have come to us down as we call the New Testament, Scripture. So very powerful in that sense. So anyway, I hope this is a blessing to you. Keep looking up, and remember that the Lord is with you, and He will help you through these things. We'll jump into chapter 24 soon, and we'll finish up there. Thanks for watching, and please share it, subscribe, and I hope this is a blessing to you. God bless you.